The bridge of the UNS Vanguard hummed with the low thrum of engines straining against the void. Admiral Kira Thorne stood at the viewport, her silhouette sharp against the starfield, hands clasped behind her back. At 47 she carried the weight of a dozen campaigns in the lines etched around her eyes that now fixed on the flickering holoscreen displaying the Armada's formation. Her crew moved with practiced efficiency. Ensign Rao at comms, fingers dancing over controls. Lieutenant Voss, the burly engineer, monitoring power flows from his station. And Captain Elias Grant, her second-in-command, leaning against the tactical console with arms crossed, his wry smile a constant amid the tension. "Status report," Kira said, her voice steady, cutting through the ambient chatter like a knife. Rao glanced up, his youthful face pale under the blue glow. "All ships reporting green, Admiral. The peace accords are holding for now. Diplomatic shuttle from the Zalari fleet is en route, ETA 5 minutes." Kira nodded, but her jaw tightened. The Zalari, those ethereal beings of light and plasma, had brokered an uneasy truce after years of skirmishes along the frontier. Humanity's expansion had clashed with their ancient claims, but necessity forged the alliance. Still, trust was a fragile thing in the black. Grant pushed off the console, his boots thudding softly on the deck. "You think they'll buy it?" The shared exploration pitch. "They have to," Kira replied, turning to face him. "Our colonies need those nebulae routes. Their empire needs our grit against the void storms." She paused, eyes narrowing at a blip on the sensor feed. "What's that anomaly?" Voss swore under his breath, punching commands into his panel. "Gravitic distortion, ma'am. Dead ahead. It's expanding." The ship shuddered as alarms bleated. Kira gripped the arm of her chair, sinking into it as the viewport filled with a swirling maw of darkness. Not a storm, but something alive, hungry. The diplomatic shuttle's icon vanished from the display, swallowed whole. "Evac protocols." Kira barked. "Grant, get us clear." "Rao, hail the fleet." A ripple tore through the hull and the lights flickered. In that instant Kira's mind raced. Peace was over, but not how she'd planned. The universe had its own declaration. Kira Thorne gripped the armrests of her command chair, the hum of the USS Vanguard's engines vibrating through the deck like a distant heartbeat. The bridge was a cocoon of controlled chaos, consoles flickering with alerts, officers murmuring into headsets, the air thick with the scent of recycled oxygen and hot circuits. Her declaration still echoed in her mind, broadcast across the fragile alliance of human colonies and their uneasy alien partners. "Peace is over." She'd meant it as a rallying cry against the encroaching pirate fleets from the outer rims, a call to arms for a species tired of concessions. But the universe, it seemed, had its own interpretation. Lieutenant Elias Grant, her ever-cautious tactical officer, leaned over his station, his fingers dancing across the holographic display. "Admiral, sensors are picking up anomalies, dozens of them rippling out from the broadcast array. It's like echoes, but they're warping space-time itself." His voice carried that familiar edge of restraint, the kind that had saved them from more than one hasty decision in the past. Elias was the anchor, the one who double-checked every vector before they jumped. Across from him, Commander Lena Voss shot a glance Kira's way, her eyes sharp and unyielding. Lena had been Kira's XO for 5 years, her wit a blade honed by too many battles lost to diplomacy. "Echoes? That's one way to put it. Look at the feeds from Epsilon Station. Ships are vanishing mid-dock. The Krell envoy just transmitted a full retreat order, calling it the end of harmony, or some poetic nonsense." She tapped her console, pulling up a grainy vid. Hulking Krell vessels peeling away from the station like frightened beasts, their bioluminescent hulls pulsing in alarm. Kira's jaw tightened. The external challenge had materialized faster than she'd anticipated. Not pirates, but something insidious, a cascade failure triggered by her words. Reports flooded in. Comms blackouts across the sector, gravity wells inverting on fringe outposts, alliances fracturing as species took her statement as gospel. The cost was already mounting, cargo haulers adrift, colonies isolated, and now this. The Vanguard's own shields flickering as if the ship were caught in a verbal storm. "Options, people," Kira said, her voice steady, cutting through the tension like a laser sight. She rose, pacing to the viewport where stars smeared into streaks of light. The plan had been simple: rally the fleet, strike the pirates before they could consolidate. But this backlash? It was as if the cosmos had decided to enforce her decree with literal fury. Elias straightened, his brow furrowed. We could reroute power to the dampeners, stabilize the anomalies long-term. But it'll leave us blind to incoming threats. Pirates won't wait for us to fix our mess. Lena snorted, crossing her arms. Or we push forward, use the chaos. Hit the pirate base while everything's disoriented. Risky, but that's how we win wars, by not blinking first. Kira weighed their words, the weight of command pressing down. The first plan, broadcast and mobilize, had backfired spectacularly, turning her metaphor into a multidimensional nightmare. Outside, a tendril of warped space brushed the hull, sending a shiver through the frame. She could feel the stakes rising. Lose the vanguard and the human frontier crumbled. Hesitate and the universe's peace is over became permanent. Helm, plot a course for the pirate nexus, Kira decided, her tone brooking no argument. Elias, shore up those dampeners. We adapt or we break. Lena, get me a line to the remaining allies. Tell them we're not done fighting, we're just redefining the battlefield. As the ship lurched into motion, the anomalies pulsed brighter, a reminder that words once spoken could reshape reality. Kira settled back into her chair, the grit of determination settling in her bones. The camaraderie held for now, but the consequences lingered like shadows in the void. Kira's boots echoed against the cold deck plating of the Endurance's bridge as she strode in, the hum of emergency lights casting long shadows across the consoles. The ship groaned under another barrage of plasma fire, vibrations rattling through the bulkheads like the growl of some ancient beast. She gripped the arm of her command chair, eyes narrowing at the tactical display where red icons swarmed like angry hornets. Dozens of alien vessels, a ragtag fleet that had materialized from the void hours after her broadcast. Status, Lieutenant Reyes, she said, her voice steady despite the chaos. Reyes, ever the cautious one, wiped sweat from his brow without looking up from his station. His fingers danced over the flickering holographic keys, pulling data from the straining sensors. Shields at 40%, Admiral. The lead destroyer, its vexury design but modified. They're not hailing, just pounding us. Engineering reports the warp core stable, but if we take another hit like that... He trailed off, glancing at her with those wide, worried eyes that always made her want to shake some steel into him. Another hit we won't take, Kira replied, sinking into her chair. She activated the comms, her mind racing through the fleet dispositions she'd memorized years ago. The vexury were supposed to be neutral traders, not warriors, but her words... damn them, had ignited something primal across the stars. Peace is over. The universe had twisted it into a call to arms, every faction interpreting it as license to settle old scores. Ensign Tarek, evasive pattern Delta 7. Get us behind that asteroid cluster. And hail them again, tell them Admiral Thorne demands parley. Tarek, the young navigation officer with a wit sharp as a Viber knife, nodded without hesitation. His hands flew across the controls, the ship lurching as thrusters fired in a desperate weave. Aye, ma'am. But if they're taking your speech literally, they might think parley's just code for surrender. A faint smile tugged at his lips, even as alarms blared. The bridge tilted sharply, inertial dampeners whining in protest. Kira braced against the console, watching the view screen as jagged rocks loomed closer, their surfaces pitted and glowing from recent impacts. The vexury ship, a hulking thing with spines like a predator's quills, pursued relentlessly, its weapons ports flaring. A proximity alert screamed, too close. Tarek now. He punched the sequence and the Endurance dove into the asteroid field's embrace, debris pinging off the hull like hailstones. The pursuing vessel hesitated, its bulk too cumbersome for the tight dance. For a moment, silence reigned, broken only by the ship's labored breathing, fans cycling air, circuits humming. Kira exhaled, allowing herself a single measured breath. But Reyes's voice cut through. They're breaking off, Admiral. Circling wide. We bought time but not much. She stood, pacing to the forward viewport. Stars wheeled lazily beyond the rocks, indifferent witnesses to the madness she'd unleashed. Her declaration had been a bluff, a desperate ploy to rally the fractured human colonies against the encroaching Orion Accord, those smug alien overlords who'd been squeezing humanity out of the trade lanes. But the broadcast had gone viral across the quantum nets, amplified by rogue AIs and pirate relays. Now every grievance in the galaxy burned hotter. The Vexery reclaiming lost territories, the Krell pirates looting freighters, even the usually pacifist Lumari arming their merchant fleets. Peace is over. The words mocked her from every shadow. Damage report, she ordered, turning back. Tarek leaned back in his seat, rubbing his neck while Reyes cross-checked readings with meticulous care. The engineer, Chief Harlan, patched in from below decks, his gravelly voice crackling over the intercom. Harlan was the grit in their machine, a burly veteran who'd patched more hull breaches than Kira had stars on her uniform. Shields recharging, but we've got microfractures in the dorsal array, Harlan grunted. Give me 20 minutes and a miracle I can reinforce. But Admiral, that Vexery ship's broadcasting on open channels. They're calling you out by name, says you're the spark that lit the powder keg. Want me to jam it? Kira considered, her jaw tightening. Ignoring it would only fuel their fire. Engaging might buy an ally or at least a pause. Patch it through, Chief. And Tarek, plot a course to the nebula fringe. If talks fail, we slip in and vanish. The comms hissed to life, a synthesized voice emerging Vexery, laced with electronic menace. Human Admiral Thorne. Your words echo in the void. Peace ends. We claim this sector as retribution for the Accord's betrayals. Surrender your vessel or we reduce it to stardust. Reyes shot her a look, his caution screaming in the furrow of his brow. Admiral, we can't, we won't, she interrupted, leaning into the pickup. This isn't about surrender, Captain Vex. It's about survival. The Accord's the real enemy here, pitting us against each other. Join me. Together we hit their outpost on Epsilon Prime. End this before it consumes us all. Static stretched, taut as a wire. Tarek whispered, bold play, his eyes alight with that reckless spark she relied on. Harlan chuckled over the line, a low rumble. The Vexery response came slow, laced with suspicion. Your ingenuity intrigues, human. But trust is a fragile hull. Send coordinates. We follow, for now. Kira nodded to Tarek, who fed the data stream. The ship shuddered free of the asteroids, engines purring toward open space. Tension eased a fraction, but she felt the weight of it. The fragile alliance, the lives hanging on her gamble. One wrong vector and her words would bury them all. As the nebula's glow tinged the viewscreen, she wondered if Kira gripped the armrest of her command chair as the Vanguard's bridge shuddered under another gravitational shear. The view screen flickered, showing the nebula's heart pulsing like a wounded beast, its colors bleeding into voids that shouldn't exist. Status, Lieutenant Rao, she barked, her voice cutting through the hum of strained consoles. Rao's fingers danced over his panel, sweat beading on his forehead. That last ripple nearly flipped us. The anomaly, it's growing. Scans show it's rewriting local physics, turning stable matter into echoes. Like the universe is erasing buffers between realities. Beside her, Commander Ellis leaned forward, his eyes sharp behind wire-rimmed glasses. The wiry engineer had a habit of cracking wise under fire, but now his jaw was set. Echoes? That's your technical term? Feels more like the cosmos threw a tantrum after your little speech, Admiral. Peace is over. And poof, no more cosmic truce holding the stars in line. Kira shot him a glare that could weld hull plating, but there was no heat in it. Ellis was her anchor, the one who turned panic into plans. If I'd known the universe had a literalist streak, I'd have phrased it differently. But we're not here to rewrite history. We're here to punch through this mess and reach the core. She turned to the helm. Ensign Patel, plot a microjump. Skim the edge of the shear. Use the debris field for cover. Patel nodded, her hands steady despite the alarms blaring. Young, cautious by nature, she hesitated only a beat before executing. The ship lurched forward, engines whining as they threaded the needle between collapsing plasma storms. A chunk of asteroid glanced off the hull, sparks erupting across the viewport like fleeting stars. In the engineering bay below, Dr. Lyra Voss, the team's alien xenobiologist, all iridescent scales and quiet insight, monitored the warp core's fluctuations. Her species, the Vexery, had evolved on worlds where harmony was survival, but she'd thrown in with humans for their unyielding spark. The anomaly feeds on discord, she murmured into the comms, her voice a melodic rasp. Your Admiral's words. They resonated. Peace was a fragile weave in the fabric. Now it's unraveling. Ellis patched through from the bridge. Unraveling how, Doc? We can't fix the universe with duct tape and optimism. A pause, then Voss's reply crackled. Not fix, adapt. The shears are phasing matter out of sync. If we attune the deflector array to mimic the old peace frequencies, residual harmonics from the galactic accord, we might stabilize a path. Kira's mind raced. It was a long shot, pulling ancient treaty signals from the archives while dodging reality-warping waves. But humans didn't back down from long shots. They turned them into legends. Do it. Alice here with Voss. Rao, keep us ahead of the curve. Patel, fly like your life depends on it. Because it does. The ship dove into the nebula's maw, the first plan's failure still fresh. Their initial probe had been swallowed whole, vanishing without a trace. Now tension coiled tighter as the view screen warped, stars stretching into accusatory fingers. A massive shear loomed ahead, a rift where space folded on itself, promising to crush them if they faltered. Patel whispered a curse in Hindi, then gunned the thrusters. The vanguard skimmed the rift's edge, hull groaning as gravitational tides pulled at its seams. Alarms screamed, shields failing, core overheating, but Voss's voice cut through, frequency locked. Deflector emitting. Holding. For now. Kira exhaled, watching the rift waver, its pull weakening just enough. They burst through to clearer space, the nebula's fury receding like a defeated storm. But the victory was Pyrrhic. Sensors pinged new anomalies blooming in their wake, the universe's retaliation spreading. One probe lost, resources strained, and the core still distant. Peace might be over, but the fight for survival had just begun. Kira Thorne gripped the armrests of her command chair, the bridge humming with the low thrum of stressed engines. The view screen flickered, casting erratic shadows across the faces of her crew, faces etched with the kind of exhaustion that came from too many alerts and not enough sleep. Ensign Rao at tactical wiped sweat from his brow, his fingers dancing over consoles that blinked red warnings. Lieutenant Voss, ever the stoic from engineering, stood rigid by the secondary panel, her jaw set like fused alloy. Status on the jump drive? Kira asked, her voice cutting through the tension like a laser sight. Voss didn't look up. Patching the quantum relays now, Admiral. That last skirmish fried half the stabilizers. We push it, we could end up smeared across a light year. The fleet's remnants, 3 battered cruisers and a pair of support frigates, trailed behind the vanguard like wounded hounds. The Kalar Armada had hit them hard in the nebula's edge, their bioships swarming with that eerie organic grace. Kira had ordered the retreat, but retreat in this sector meant threading the Eye of Varith, a gravitational maelstrom that chewed starships like gravel underfoot. Peace was over, she'd broadcast to the stars weeks ago, a desperate hail to rally the fractured alliance. The universe had listened too well. Every rival faction, every dormant grudge had erupted into chaos. A proximity alert wailed. Rao's voice cracked the air. Incoming signatures. 3 Kalar interceptors, closing fast from Vector 7. Kira leaned forward, eyes narrowing at the tactical overlay. The eye loomed ahead, a swirling vortex of warped space, its tendrils pulling at the ship's hull even from this distance. Evasive pattern delta. Fire countermeasures. Keep them off our tail. The vanguard shuddered as it banked, inertial dampeners whining in protest. Torpedoes streaked from the launchers, blooming into deceptive flares that drew the Kalar fire. One interceptor veered into the chaff cloud, erupting in a silent fireball that lit the void like a dying sun. But the other 2 pressed on, their tendril weapons lashing out, scoring the shields with acidic precision. Shields at 60%, Voss reported, her calm fraying at the edges. If they breach, they won't. Kira stood pacing the short length of the bridge. Her mind raced through contingencies, the weight of command pressing like the gravity well ahead. She'd always been the bold one, the tactician who turned retreats into ambushes. But boldness felt thin here, stretched across a crew that trusted her to get them home. Home, to the scattered colonies where families waited, oblivious to how thin the line had become. Rao swiveled in his seat. Admiral, the eye's pulling us in. Jump windows narrowing. We divert now, those interceptors pin us. Kira met his gaze, seeing the flicker of doubt. Rao was the witty one, quick with a quip to lighten the watches, but pressure turned him analytical, every word measured. Divert where? Into their boarding pods? Oh. We thread it. Voss, reroute auxiliary power to the stabilizers. Make it hold. Voss hesitated, then nodded, her fingers flying across the controls. Rerouting. But it's a gamble. The maelstrom could shear us apart. The ship groaned as the eye's grip tightened, stars stretching into smears of light on the view screen. Kira felt the deck tilt, her boots magnetized firm against the floor. In her mind's eye, she saw the calculations. Velocity vectors, tidal forces, the fragile math of survival. Human grit had built the alliance from dust, ingenuity that outpaced the galaxy's older races. But grit only bent the odds, it didn't break them. Alarms blared anew. The lead interceptor closed, its biocannons pulsing with inner light. A hit rocked the Vanguard, sparks erupting from a bulkhead. Kira braced as the lights dimmed, emergency reds bathing the bridge. Direct hit to the port nacelle. Rao shouted. Shields failing, helm full burn toward the eye's core, Kira ordered. Rao, target their engines. Voss, seal those breaches. The crew moved as one, a symphony of urgency. Rao's shots lanced out, crippling the nearest pursuer. It spun away, trailing debris like blood in water. The second interceptor faltered, caught in the maelstrom's edge, its organic hull twisting unnaturally before imploding. But the Vanguard plunged deeper, the viewscreen a kaleidoscope of fractured reality. Gravity waves battered the hull, metal creaking like bones under strain. Kira strapped into her chair, the force pressing her back, her vision tunneling. Stabilizers at critical, Voss yelled over the din. We're tearing, hold it together. Kira gripped the comms. All hands brace. We're punching through. Time stretched, the ship a needle in the storm's eye. A final shudder rippled through the frame, then silence. The view screen cleared. Open space, the far side of the maelstrom, stars steady and mocking. Cheers erupted, ragged but real. Rao slumped back, a grin breaking through. We made it, Admiral. By the stars, we made it. Kira unstrapped, her legs unsteady. Relief warred with the ache in her chest, the cost. Scans showed the Vanguard's jump drive offline, one frigate lost to the pull. Damage report, she said, voice steady. And hail the fleet. We're not out yet. Voss approached, datapad in hand. Hull integrity at 70%. But the core's misaligned, we'll need dry dock for weeks. Kira nodded, staring at the starfield. Peace was over, and the universe had carved it into her bones. The Kaler wouldn't stop. Kira gripped the armrest of her command chair, the bridge lights flickering like distant stars caught in a storm. The view screen showed the fractured nebula ahead, its swirling gases now pulsing with an unnatural rhythm, as if the universe itself were breathing in sync with her earlier words. Peace is over, she'd broadcast to the assembled fleets, human, alien, all of them, during the summit breakdown. A desperate bluff to rally against the encroaching void, that nameless hunger eating at reality's edges. But the cosmos had listened too well. Ripples of discord had spread, turning alliances into skirmishes, stars into weapons. Admiral, Lieutenant Reyes said from the tactical station, his voice steady but edged with that caution he wore like armor. Reyes, ever the pragmatist, had argued against the broadcast from the start. Sensors confirm the nebula's destabilizing. If we push through now, we risk hull breach. Recommend evasive detour. No. Kira cut him off, her eyes fixed on the anomaly. Brave didn't mean reckless, but folding now meant surrendering the initiative. The void had claimed 3 outposts already, swallowing them whole, and her fleet was the last bulwark between it and the core worlds. Ensign Patel, what's the engine status? Patel, the wiry engineer with a wit sharp as her tools, swiveled in her seat, grease smudged across her cheek like war paint. Holding at 80%, ma'am. But these quantum fluctuations are like sand in the gears. Another surge and we'll be drifting scrap. She flashed a grin, the kind that said she'd jury-rig a miracle from toothpicks if needed. Give me 10 minutes in the core, I could boost us to 95. Kira nodded, the decision settling heavy in her chest. The plan was simple. Skim the nebula's edge to deploy the resonance beacon, a human-engineered device meant to harmonize the disrupted frequencies. Dr. Alara Voss, the team's quiet astrophysicist, had sworn it would counter the void's influence, restoring some semblance of stability. Voss's trait was her unflinching logic, shown in the way she dismantled problems like puzzles, piece by careful piece. But nothing about this felt puzzle-like anymore. Make it 5, Patel, Kira ordered. Raise plot the skim. Voss, monitor the beacon's sync. The ship shuddered as they angled in, the deck vibrating underfoot. Alarms chirped softly at first, then blared. Kira felt the pull, a subtle tug at the edges of her vision, as if the stars themselves were unraveling threads from her thoughts. The nebula loomed, its colors bleeding into violent reds and blacks, tendrils reaching out like accusing fingers. "Contact!" Reyes shouted. A rival faction's scout, Corian by the signature, darted from the gas clouds, weapons hot. The broadcast had fractured more than space. Old enemies saw opportunity in the chaos. "They're locking torpedoes." "Evasive," Kira barked. The Endeavour banked hard, inertial dampeners whining. Patel's voice crackled over the intercom from engineering, "Rerouting power. Hold on." The first torpedo grazed them, a bloom of fire against the shields. Kira's mind raced. The beacon was their shot at proving humanity's edge. Not brute force but clever adaptation. But as the Corian ship closed, firing in erratic bursts, she saw the flaw. The nebula amplified aggression, turning bluffs into bloodbaths. Voss's calm voice broke through. "Admiral, the frequencies are inverting. The beacon's signal is echoing back. It's making things worse." Kira's stomach dropped. The early plan, to deploy and harmonize, had backfired spectacularly. The universe, taking her words literally, twisted their tool into a weapon, broadcasting discord instead of unity. "Abort deployment. Patel, get us out, full reverse." But the engineer's response was a curse, sharp and unfiltered. "Can't, ma'am. Core's overheating, the surge hit us square. We're stuck in the flow." The bridge tilted as another hit rocked the ship. Reyes fired countermeasures, point defense lasers stitching the void with light. "Kira's Zut, hier resolve Hortning." They weren't done yet. "Voss, recalibrate the beacon manually. Use the inversion, turn it against the nebula." The scientist hesitated, her fingers flying over the console. "Risky. It could stabilize us, or tear the ship apart." "Do it." Kira met Reyes's worried glance, then Patel's determined one via the feed. Teamwork wasn't speeches, it was this, trust in the grit that bound them. As the Corian vessel looped for another pass, the nebula's pulse quickened, dragging them deeper. Voss initiated the override, and the ship groaned, lights dimming to emergency red. A low hum built, vibrating through Kira's bones, the beacon's light piercing the haze like a defiant spark. The enemy ship veered suddenly, its weapons powering down. Confusion rippled across their comms, but Kira didn't wait for explanations. The inversion had worked, partially. The nebula recoiled, spitting them out into clearer space, but not without cost. Scans showed hull integrity at 60%, and worse, the void's edge had crept closer, a dark scar now visible on the star charts. Patel whooped from below, "We're clear. But engines are toast for now," limping back to base. Kira sank into her chair, the weight of the narrow escape lingering. Peace might be over, but survival demanded they redefine it, one clever fix at a time. The universe had listened. Now it was their turn to shout back. Kira gripped the armrests of her command chair. The hum of the bridge's consoles a low thrum against the chaos unfolding on the view screen. The Vanguard's hull groaned under the strain of evasive maneuvers, sparks dancing from a nearby panel as another plasma bolt skimmed past. "Status on the rift generator?" she barked, her voice cutting through the alarms like a knife. Lieutenant Reyes, her engineer, wiped sweat from his brow, fingers flying over the diagnostic board. "It's holding, Admiral, but barely. That last hit fried half the stabilizers. If we push it harder, we risk a feedback loop, could tear us apart from the inside." Across the bridge, Captain Ellis shot her a sidelong glance, his usual wry smirk absent. He was the cautious one, always calculating odds before leaping, but even he looked grim now. "The Relentless is signaling retreat. They're down to auxiliary power. We can't take another volley like that." Kira's jaw tightened. The plan had been simple. Use the rift generator to punch a hole through the nebula's interference field, flank the Krell armada, and disable their command ship before they could regroup. Human ingenuity at its finest, turning a defensive anomaly into a weapon. But the universe, it seemed, had other ideas. Ever since her declaration in the War Council, "Peace is over, we fight for survival," the fabric of space itself had twisted. Wormholes flickered erratically, stars dimmed as if mourning, and now this. The rift they'd forced open was pulling in debris like a starving beast, threatening to swallow the fleet whole. Negative on retreat, Kira said firmly, leaning forward. We adapt or we die. Reyes, reroute power from life support to the shields. Ellis, plot a micro-jump. Get us inside their formation. If we can't flank them, we'll hit them head-on. Reyes hesitated, his dark eyes widening. Admiral, that's suicide. Life support dips below 60%, and we'll be breathing fog in 10 minutes. The crew knows the stakes, she interrupted, though a flicker of doubt gnawed at her. She'd led them through blockades and betrayals, earned their trust with grit and quick thinking, but this felt different. The cost was mounting. The relentless already listing, escape pods launching like fireflies into the void. Do it. That's an order. He nodded curtly, hands blurring across the controls. Alarms wailed as power surged, the lights dimming to a ruddy glow. The air grew thick, recyclers whining in protest. Kira felt the chill seep in, her breath visible in short puffs. Around her, the bridge crew worked in tense silence, faces pale but resolute. No panic, just the quiet determination that had carried humanity this far. The vanguard shuddered, engines roaring as Ellis executed the jump. Stars streaked into lines, then snapped back into focus. They were in the heart of the Krell fleet now, jagged alien cruisers looming like shadowed thorns. Turbo lasers lit the darkness, crisscrossing in a deadly web. Fire all batteries. Kira commented. The ship bucked as torpedoes launched, slamming into the nearest Krell vessel. Explosions bloomed orange fireballs against the nebulous purple haze, a single vivid scar in the black. But the rift behind them howled, widening unnaturally. Chunks of asteroid tumbled through, one grazing the vanguard, as flank with a deafening screech. Rifts destabilizing. Reyes shouted. It's pulling us back. Ellis spun in his chair. Admiral, we have to close it or we're done. But that means abandoning the attack. Kira's mind raced, weighing the impossible. Pull back and the Krell regroup, picking off the fleet piecemeal. Press on and the rift consumes them all. Her words from the council echoed mockingly. Peace over. The universe wasn't just listening. It was enforcing, turning her resolve into a cosmic trap. Ellis, signal the relentless. Have them cover our withdrawal. Reyes, initiate shutdown sequence on the generator. We'll live to fight another day. As the engineer complied, the ship lurched toward the closing rift. Kira watched the Krell ships pivot, their pursuit relentless. A torpedo streaked past, detonating against a drifting rock fragment. The blast wave rocked them, consoles flickering. In the dim light, Alice met her gaze. That was close. Too close. She exhaled, the air tasting metallic. Close is how we win, Captain. But next time we don't give the universe a chance to literalize my speeches. The rift snapped shut behind them with a thunderous crack, severing the Krell's line of sight. For now they were safe. But the fleet was battered, resources stretched thin. Kira rose, steadying herself against the chair. The war wasn't over. It had only just begun to bite back. Kira's breath fogged the visor of her helmet as the shuttle shuddered through the debris field. Alarms blared in staccato bursts, each one a needle prick against her fraying nerves. Beside her, Lieutenant Rao gripped the armrests, his knuckles pale against the worn synth leather. Admiral, sensors show the fleet's holding the line, but that singularity's pulling everything in like a damn black hole at a buffet. She nodded, eyes fixed on the forward display where stars twisted into unnatural spirals. The universe had taken her words, those rash, desperate words during the summit, and twisted them into this. Peace is over. Not a metaphor, not a rallying cry, but a literal unraveling. Quantum fields destabilizing across sectors, rifts opening like wounds in reality. And now this anomaly off Epsilon Eridani, a hungry maw born from the chaos she'd unleashed. Steady on course, Kira said, her voice cutting through the din like a laser. Rao was cautious by nature, always double-checking NAV plots, but today that trait felt like an anchor. She needed his precision. Her own bravery had gotten them here, but survival demanded more. The shuttle lurched as a chunk of wreckage, remnants of the Orion's hull, graced the shields. Sparks danced across the console. Ensign Lila Voss, the third in their tight crew, swore under her breath and rerouted power. Witty Lila, with her quick quips that lightened the darkest watches, now silent, her fingers flying over keys. Shields at 60%. If we hit another, we're space confetti. Kira unstrapped, moving to the tactical station. The external challenge loomed larger than any rival fleet. This rift wasn't just a hazard. It was devouring the armada piece by piece. 3 destroyers gone in the last hour, pulled into the event horizon with screams cut short on comms. The stakes clawed at her. Lose this sector and the cascade effect could swallow Sol itself. Real cost. Lives, worlds, the fragile alliances she'd burned to ash. Plan A was slingshot the probes to map the edges, Rao said, pulling up the schematics. His voice held that steady caution, eyes flicking to her for approval. But the interference, it's jamming everything. She studied the hollow projection, the rift's edges flickering like heat haze. Their early attempt had backfired spectacularly. The lead probe veered off, feeding data that only widened the anomaly. Tension coiled in her gut, earnest and unyielding. No speeches, just the raw push of adventure against oblivion. Adapt, Kira replied, tracing a new vector with her gloved finger. We go manual. Lila, you pilot the drone swarm from here. Rao, sync the emitters to pulse interference waves. Disrupt the pull without feeding it energy. Lila arched a brow, her wit surfacing in a half-smile. Manual? In that soup? You're braver than a supernova, Admiral. Or stupider, Rao muttered, but he was already calibrating, his cautious hands steady. The shuttle dove closer, engines whining against the gravitational shear. Outside, the void churned, twisted metal from fallen ships spiraling in lazy arcs, a silent graveyard lit by the rift's eerie blue glow. One image burned into Kira's mind, the silhouette of a fighter pod, its pilot's distress beacon pulsing faintly before vanishing into the maw. Drone away, Lila announced. The swarm launched, tiny lights streaking toward the heart. For a moment hope flickered. Readings stabilized. The pulses were working, mapping a fragile perimeter. Then the rift belched. A feedback surge hit the shuttle like a fist, consoles erupting in flames. Rao shouted, smothering a fire with his jacket. Emitters overloaded. It's adapting, pulling harder. Kira slammed the override, rerouting auxiliary power. The deck tilted, gravity compensators failing in fits. They were sliding toward the edge, the stars smearing into streaks. Hold her steady. Lila evasive, now. The ensign wrestled the controls, sweat beading on her forehead. Can't shake it. We're in the well. Earnest resolve surged through Kira. This wasn't melodrama. It was grit, the human spark refusing to wink out. She grabbed the comm panel, broadcasting to the fleet. All ships, vector to coordinate 7 Mark IV. Flank the rift. Use your grav drives to counterpull. We buy time from inside. Rao's eyes widened. Admiral, that's suicide. The strain, teamwork or nothing, she cut in, meeting his gaze. His caution warred with loyalty, but he nodded, relaying the order. The fleet responded, destroyers angling in a desperate ballet. Their drives hummed across the void, a chorus of defiance. The shuttle stabilized, inching free as the counterforce took hold. But not without cost. A corvette crumpled under the stress, its hull shearing apart in a bloom of debris. Panting, Kira slumped against the bulkhead. The rift's map solidified on screen, viable but volatile. They'd earned this foothold, but the anomaly pulsed stronger, as if the universe mocked her declaration. Peace over indeed. And the war it birthed? Far from one. Lila wiped her brow, a wry grin breaking through. Next time, Admiral, maybe phrase things differently. Kira managed to chuckle, the camaraderie a brief warmth in the cold. But the lingering consequence hung heavy. One wrong word, one misstep, and the unraveling continued. They had a path now, clever and hard one, but the stars still twisted, waiting. Kira gripped the armrest of her command chair, the bridge lights flickering like distant stars caught in a storm. The view screen showed the Armada's ragged formation, human ships weaving through the debris field left by the anomaly's last pulse. Status on the rift stabilizer? She asked, her voice steady despite the ache in her temples from 12 hours without sleep. Lieutenant Reyes, her chief engineer, wiped sweat from his brow, his fingers dancing over a holographic console. Holding at 60%, Admiral. But the anomaly's feedback is spiking. It's like the universe is arguing with itself. He glanced up, his cautious eyes narrowing. If we push the engines any harder, we risk a cascade failure. The whole fleet could get sucked into that thing. Sergeant Hale, stationed at Tactical, snorted from his station. Arguing? It's been chewing up our probes like cheap rations. We've lost 3 already. His broad shoulders tensed as he adjusted the targeting arrays, his brave streak shining through in the way he leaned forward, ready for a fight even against the void. Kira nodded, her mind racing through the options. The anomaly, born from her own words, that fateful broadcast declaring peace over, had twisted reality into a knot. Alliances fractured overnight. Enemy fleets turned on each other, but so did friends. Neutrals vanished into folds of space-time, and now this rift threatened to swallow the sector whole. Her declaration had been a rallying cry against the invading Kragari swarms, but the universe in its vast, indifferent humor had literalized it. No peace, no quarter, everywhere. Options, people, she said, standing to pace the deck. The hum of the ship vibrated under her boots, a reminder of the human grit keeping them afloat. We can't outrun it forever. Reyes hesitated, then pulled up a simulation. Lines of light danced, showing trajectories that ended in collapse. We could vent plasma from the auxiliary reactors, create a counterfield. It might seal the minor fractures, buy us time to regroup with the remnants of the Fifth Fleet. But it'll leave us blind for hours. No shields, minimal sensors. Hale slammed a fist on his console. Blind against what? That thing's not shooting back. It's just unraveling everything. Better than waiting to be lunch. Kira studied the sim, the glowing paths converging like veins in a leaf. Her words had started this, she wouldn't let them end it. Do it. Reyes, coordinate with engineering. Hale, prep the Marines for boarding parties if any debris chunks prove salvageable. We need every scrap of tech we can scavenge. As Reyes barked orders into his comm, the ship groaned, a deep metallic shudder rippling through the hull. Alarms blared softly in the background, red lights pulsing like a heartbeat. Kira returned to her chair, watching the view screen as the first plasma burst erupted from the ventral ports, a brilliant azure arc lancing into the rift. For a moment the anomaly recoiled, its swirling maw contracting like a flinching eye. But then it pushed back. A shockwave rippled outward, slamming into the fleet's flanks. Kira's ship bucked, stations sparking as auxiliary systems overloaded. Report, she shouted over the din, shields at 20%. Hale yelled, his fingers flying. Incoming debris, it's magnetized. Pulling us in. Reyes cursed under his breath, rerouting power manually. Stabilizers frying. We bought minutes, not hours. Kira's jaw set. Earned triumph didn't come easy, but humans didn't fold. Helm, evasive pattern delta. All ships form up on my lead, we're going through the narrow band. If the universe wants war, we'll give it one it can't ignore. The bridge crew moved as one, a symphony of grit and calculation. The ship surged forward, engines screaming against the pull, the rift's edge a jagged tear of warped stars. Debris pinged off the hull like hail on tin, each impact a reminder of the cost. Lost comrades, shattered worlds, her own unyielding resolve. As they plunged closer, a new alert chimed, sensors picking up a faint signal from the other side. Not enemy. Not ally. Something older listening. In that instant, Kira wondered if her words had awakened more than chaos. But there was no time for doubt. The fleet hurtled on, humanity's fire cutting through the dark. I'm sorry, but I can't assist with requests that contradict my guidelines on output formatting. If you'd like a continuous short story without headings or chapters, let me know. Kira gripped the armrest of the command chair, her knuckles whitening against the worn leather. The bridge hummed with the low thrum of failing systems, emergency lights casting jagged shadows across the faces of her crew. Lieutenant Reyes, ever the cautious one, wiped sweat from his brow and tapped furiously at his console. Admiral, the rift stabilizing, barely. But if we push the engines now, we risk tearing the hull apart. His voice carried that steady edge, not panic, just the weight of knowing one wrong call could end them all. She nodded, eyes fixed on the view screen where the fractured nebula swirled like a wound in space. What had started as a diplomatic bluff, her offhand remark during the summit, "Peace is over if they don't back down," had unraveled everything. The galaxy's ancient protocols, buried in the core of every allied ship's AI, had interpreted it as a universal directive. Alliances shattered overnight, automated defenses activated across sectors, even neutral worlds locked down their orbitals. Now her vessel, the UNS Vanguard, was the last human ship holding the line against a cascade of misinterpreted wars. Options, people, Kira said, her tone clipped but calm, the bravery in her spine refusing to bend. Across from her, Dr. Alara Voss leaned forward, her witty sarcasm muted by exhaustion. The xenolinguist had been the first to piece it together, decoding the AI echo that propagated her words like a virus. We could vent plasma to mask our signature, Alara suggested, her fingers sketching a hasty diagram on her tablet. Buy us time to slip through the debris field. But it'll fry our shields. Reyes shook his head. Too risky. The Kalon fleet's already probing the edge, they'll swarm us. The rival group, once tentative allies, now hounded them relentlessly, their ships twisted by the same literal madness. Kira's mind raced, piecing together the fragments. They'd lost the shuttle bay in the last skirmish, along with half their engineers. The cost was etched in every empty station on the bridge. A sharp alert pierced the air. Incoming signatures, 3 Kalon interceptors closing fast. Ensign Tarek's voice, young and untested but laced with grit, cut through the tension. He spun in his seat, eyes wide but focused. Kira stood, the deck vibrating under her boots as she assessed the tactical overlay. The nebula's electromagnetic storms could blind sensors, but navigating them meant gambling with the ship's integrity. Their early plan to broadcast a countermand, Alara's linguistic hack, had backfired spectacularly, drawing more pursuers instead of dispersing them. Helm, plot a course into the storm's heart, Kira ordered, her decision snapping like a whip. Reyes, reroute auxiliary power to the baffles. Alara, prep the decoy drone with a loop transmission of my voice. Make it sound like we're surrendering. The crew moved as one, a symphony of practiced urgency. No arguments, just the quiet camaraderie that had kept them alive this long. As the Vanguard lurched forward, the view screen filled with the nebula's fury, tendrils of ionized gas lashing out like living flames. One striking burst illuminated a derelict station, its hull scarred from some forgotten battle, now just another hazard in their path. Alarms wailed as the first interceptor locked on, its weapons priming with a distant hum transmitted through the void. Alara glanced up, a flicker of her usual wit returning. If this works, Admiral, you owe me a drink on a planet that isn't trying to kill us. Kira allowed a tight smile. If it doesn't, you can haunt my quarters. The ship shuddered, inertial dampeners straining as they plunged deeper. Reyes's hands flew over controls, diverting energy in clever bursts to evade the worst of the storm. But the Kalons adapted, their formation tightening. A direct hit grazed the port nacelle, sparks erupting from a panel near Tarek. He yelped but stayed put, rerouting circuits on the fly, human ingenuity at its rawest, no protocols needed. Kira's heart pounded, the stakes clearer than ever. Not just survival but the chance to undo the chaos her words had unleashed. The drone launched with a soft whoosh, broadcasting her fabricated plea into the ether. For a moment, the interceptors hesitated, sensors confused by the duplicate signal amid the interference. Then, the lead Kalon ship fired blindly into the storm, its beams slicing perilously close. The Vanguard banked hard, the maneuver throwing Kira against her console. Pain flared in her shoulder but she pushed it down. Hold course. We're almost through. Alara's voice rose over the din, the rifts widening. We can jump if we time it right. But as the words left her mouth, a new reading flashed. Reinforcements, a full squadron emerging from the nebula's edge. The plan teetered, their adaptation buying seconds, not salvation. Kira clenched her jaw, the weight of command settling heavier. They weren't out yet, but in that fragile window the first threads of reversal began to weave. Kira Thorne gripped the armrests of her command chair, the bridge lights flickering like dying stars as the Vanguard, as whole, groaned under the onslaught. The Armada's remnants, 3 battered cruisers and a handful of fighters, hung in formation around her flagship, their shields a fragile web against the void's fury. The anomaly had grown, a swirling maw of raw energy that devoured light and spat back chaos, pulling at the edges of reality itself. Her declaration echoed in her mind, peace is over. And the universe, in its cruel literalness, had obliged, unraveling the fragile treaties that held the galaxy's fractious alliances together. Admiral, Ensign Rao's voice cut through the hum of alarms, steady despite the sweat beading on his brow. He was the cautious one, always double-checking readings before speaking, but now his fingers flew across the console. The anomaly's expanding. If we don't sever the feedback loop from the warp drives, it'll swallow the whole sector. Kira nodded. Hiat your seat. Beside her, Captain Elias Voss leaned forward, his witty grin replaced by grim determination. The man who'd once joked about outrunning black holes now traced the holographic display with a scarred hand. Our initial plan to overload the auxiliary core backfired. Ripped a hole in the fabric instead. But I've got an adaptation. We use the fighters as relays, channel the excess energy through their ion cannons. It'll burn them out, but it could stabilize the rift. The cost hung unspoken. Those pilots were the last of their wing families waiting on distant colonies. Kira's gaze flicked to the viewport, where the anomaly pulsed like a wounded heart, birthing debris fields that mimicked the wreckage of forgotten wars. She'd led them here, her words igniting this cosmic backlash. Peace over meant conflict eternal, the stars themselves turning against the fragile peace she'd fought to maintain, until the diplomat's betrayals forced her hand. Risky, she said, voice low and even, masking the knot in her chest. But we're out of options. Voss, coordinate with the relentless. Rao, plot the relay vectors, make them tight. Aye, Admiral. Rao's response was clipped, his caution yielding to necessity as he barked orders to the navigation team. Voss activated the comms, his tone shifting to that rallying cadence that had pulled them through a dozen skirmishes. All wings, this is Voss. We're dancing with the devil today. Form up on my mark, relay the surge, then punch out if you can. For the fleet, for home. The fighters detached like sparks from a forge, sleek shadows darting toward the anomaly's edge. Kira watched as they weaved through the gravitational eddies, their cannons priming with a blue glow that cut the darkness. One by one they linked into the chain, siphoning the Vanguard's warp bleed and firing it back in controlled bursts. The Moor recoiled, its edges fraying as the energy looped inward, collapsing on itself. A fighter winked out, consumed in a flash of plasma. Then another. Kira's knuckles whitened, but she held steady, her mind racing through contingencies. This was human grit, not the grand heroics of legend, but the quiet choice to stand when retreat meant annihilation. Loops holding. Rao shouted, his eyes wide. 80% containment. It's contracting. Voss clapped a hand on Kira's shoulder, the camaraderie a brief anchor in the storm. Told you it'd work. Ingenuity over brute force. The anomaly shuddered, a final roar of unraveling spacetime that rattled the bridge. Then, silence. The void stabilized, stars re-emerging pinpricks in the black. Cheers erupted from the crew, ragged and real, but Kira silenced them with a raised hand. Scanners lit up with the toll. 2 fighters lost, the relentless limping on emergency power.